Well, let's get to our first conversation this afternoon. Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, NECA, has called on the federal government to realign its reform policies to enable growth for businesses and enterprises in Nigeria. This call was made by the Director General NECA, Mr. Adewale Smart Oyerinde, at a press conference held in preparation for the fourth edition of the Nigerian Employers Summit with theme Enabling Sustainable Enterprise in a Transitioning Economy, now aligning with fiscal, trade and regulatory reforms for inclusive development. It's going to hold this week, that's that summit in Abuja. According to Mr. Smart Oyerinde, the summit presents an opportunity for government and the private sector to discuss the way forward and for the Nigerian economy, the macroeconomic pressures of inflation, currency reforms, unemployment, and regulatory bottlenecks continue to test the resilience of businesses and citizens alike. Mr. Oyerinde stated that despite the fact that Nigerian economy stood on a pivotal crossroads, there was a tremendous opportunity for it to reposition for enterprise-driven inclusiveness and sustainable growth. Well, let's talk to Mr. Adewale Smart Oyerinde. He joins me live from our Abuja studios. He's the Director General of Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, NECA. DG, good afternoon. Thank you so much for starting the week with us on the show.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us.
Yes, DG, I think before I get to this conversation, let me congratulate you on your election into the Executive Council of the Business Africa, that was earlier this month during the ILO conference. Congratulations, DG. That's another feather to your cap.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And another opportunity for us to deepen our influence at the African business community and also create more opportunities for our country. Thank you for the congratulations. We appreciate it. Thank you.
All right now. Yes, I think let's start with your submission ahead of your conference. Before we'll touch on that, obviously. But you're talking about aligning reforms policies to enable growth of businesses and enterprises across the country. Can you elaborate on that? What really do you mean? Specifics, when you say realigning economic reform plans of government, what do you think, what are these things we need to realign at this time?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity once again. And for us, we have watched with deep interest the various reforms that the government has been coming up with since the beginning of this administration. Rightly so, those reforms were needed to take our economy to the next phase or create the foundation for the economy to move in the trajectory that we believe it should move. We saw the fiscal policy and tax reforms by Tabo Yedele Presidential Committee, which have done a very beautiful work to come up with the reforms within the context of that space. We've also seen reforms in the immigration, in the Ministry of Interior, a reform that was driven by the Honorable Minister himself and the Comptroller General of the Immigration Service, which is also part of the engagement that we have had with the ministry. We saw in reforms going on in the trade, in the Industry, Trade and Investment Ministry. So many reforms going on at different levels of government. And part of the conversation we want to have is that the need to align those reforms so that one beautiful reform does not, unfortunately, contradict or neutralize the reforms in some other sector. We were also gladdened when earlier last week we saw it was reported that the coordinating minister of the economy, the finance minister, also visited the central bank governor, who is the head of the monetary policy space, to also align their operations, align their thinking, which is what we've not seen before. You know, before now we've seen the fiscal policy contradicting the monetary policy. I think aligning and continue to align those policies for the benefit of those that it's supposed to benefit is a key action. And the summit will provide an opportunity for us to look at those issues from different perspectives. Tax reforms is going to take a major space at the summit. The trade reforms, the reform by the Ministry of Interior will also play a major role within the context of our conversation. And the reform even in the regulatory space, the urgent need for reform in the regulatory space will also play a major role. So aligning all these reforms, creating a nexus between all these reforms is what the private sector is currently championing, and part of the things that we'll be discussing at the 4th Employers Annual Summit this week.
That sounds really good to start our conversation. And I'm looking at the thrust, enabling sustainable enterprise in a transitioning economy. Okay, so you also agree that we are in a time where there is a transition, of course, looking at the policies and where we are headed. But let me ask you directly, for the regulators in the industry, how cooperative are they being, talking about being in sync with these policies of government? They have a major role to play in this. In Lagos today, PEBEC is meeting with some strategic regulatory agencies all about the ease of doing business. I'm sure you're aware of that. So if we are doing all of this, do you think the regulatory agencies are keen in? Because they are the ones that will make this seamless.
You know, it's part of the ongoing conversation. I must commend the work that PEBEC is doing at the regulatory space. You know, trying to regulate the regulators, as we call it. And regulators, not only at the federal level, but also at the sub-national levels, they remain part of the challenges that private businesses were facing. Sometimes in December, in one of the sub-nationals, you saw a regulator going to the eve of Christmas, going to seal the premises of 3 or 4 manufacturing organizations, you know, at the eve of Christmas. We feel that is an ambush. You don't go seal the premises, going to put seal in the premises of 3 or 4 manufacturing organizations when they've not been found to be involved in narcotics. They've not been found that their premises is being used for importation or plundering of ammunition. You know, if there are regulatory issues, then we create opportunity for conversation. You know, that is what we champion. Let's dialogue about it. You know, whatever issue that might arise, let's dialogue. But taking action, Gestapo kind of action that will compromise business sustainability, compromise job creation, compromise the growth of this economy, we are definitely against it. And those are part of the issues that we have with regulators. You know, of recent, we have dealt with the issue of the Financial Reporting Council. Fortunately, the Honorable Minister for Industry, Trade and Investment magnanimously intervened. There was a pause in the implementation. Some other regulators, PEBEC also up to jumped in and also create some level of relief for organized businesses. Stakeholders engaged, but you know, surprisingly, 1 or 2 or 3 days ago, we realized that the FRCN have started sending the same demand notice to organized businesses. And we felt, look, this is anti-business. It's anti the policies of this government, you know, that want to protect organized businesses as the foundation or as the bullet to shoot this economy to where we want it to be. So it's an ongoing issue. We'll continue to engage the respective honorable ministers and engage the respective stakeholders that are supposed to rein in these regulators so that they don't compromise the great work that the president is doing in the context of first protecting current investors and then attracting new investment into this country.
Now, let's look at some of these issues, these macroeconomic pressures now, like inflation, currency reforms, and most importantly, unemployment. And as your name or name of your association reads, Nigeria's Employers Consultative Association, NECA, what are you doing in collaboration with the private sector players? Because these jobs can really not be created fully by government. What are the private sector guys doing despite the challenges of the economy? Many will still say businesses or private sector people are still thriving one way or the other. We still hear big profits from companies all around. But yes, we know that there are challenges too with manufacturers and all of that. But what are you doing in regards to employment, addressing this issue of unemployment in our country?
You know, to create jobs is not rocket science. If a business, first, is sustainable, that means the stakeholders, the shareholders, can recoup their investment. And then the business from sustainability moves to the realm of competitiveness. At that point, you have enough resources or minimal resources to expand. Now, the more you expand, the more hands you will need, except you decide to go to improve your automation propensity. So the more you expand geographically, the more hands you will need, the more jobs you will create. On the flip side, the more you contrast through whatever means, whether global economic shock or economic shocks that are created within the system, the more you contrast, the less your capacity to create jobs. So for organized businesses, within the context of the business environment, have done what we are supposed to do, and we continue to do that. That's on one space. Now, the flip side is this, and one of the things we are also doing is creating opportunities, not only for Nigerian youths to get jobs, but also be in a position to be entrepreneurs. And also supporting SMEs and MSMEs to also be in a position so that they can expand, remain sustainable, expand, and also upscale their capacity to create jobs. And it will interest you to know that during the last ILO conference, the International Labour Organization conference in Geneva, between 2nd and 14th of June, one of the definitive outcomes for us as employers, as a private sector, is we were able to, through the partnership of the International Organization of Employers, where we belong strongly, and Microsoft, we were able to negotiate and get the opportunity for IOE and Microsoft to train or upscale the capacity of 30,000 SMEs in this country on AI, artificial intelligence for improving your business. 30,000 SMEs will be trained between August and July next year, free of charge, so that they can upscale their operation, reduce their cost of production, and become much more competitive. I will also be training over another 100,000 Nigerian youths within the context of fluency in AI, so that they can also become much more competitive as individuals and are much more positioned to compete at the global IT community. So for us, it is not a straitjacket, just get a job, a 9-to-5 job. We're also creating opportunities within our ecosystem so that SMEs can grow, young Nigerians can remain competitive within the context of the global IT community. And then progressively, you are depopulating the unemployment ecosystem. So those are part of the things that we are doing, and we just hope the government will do well to do much more that is currently doing to address the issues from the regulatory environment, from the regulative and legislative environment. You know, those are key issues that we need to address.
Now, this is the 4th conference. I'd like to ask you, bringing together thought leaders, industry leaders, government officials, civil society, international community to engage. You know, some Nigerians will say a lot of conferences in Nigeria. What do you do with resolutions? Do you come up with a communique? What do you do with suggestions that also come directly from that event? 4 years gone now, four summits. So tell us about that too.
One of the beauty of the summit is that it enables the private sector to come up with alternative policy regulation to government. Government has done its bit, and those policies and reforms are meant to, they are not ends on their own, they are ends to, they are means to an end.
Okay.
And the private sector will be impacted, or the private sector is to make it work, as it were. So one of the things we have done in the last 3 summits is to come up with alternative policy recommendations. You know, governments everywhere, irrespective of the brains, the bright brains you might gather, you know, or technocrats you might bring together to work in government, they still don't know it all, you know. And the private sector being the one that wears the shoes, understand where it pains or where it pinches. So the idea for the summit is get private sector operators together, discuss these key issues that affect our sustainability, our competitiveness, and those issues that might also hinder our being competitive at the African level, you know, because of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and many other trade agreements that we have. Then we make policy recommendations, alternative policy recommendations, and share it with government, both at the federal and state level. And that we have been doing. And we are proud to say many of our recommendations have also been implemented by government at different levels. Recommendation on how to revamp the economy, recommendation on skills development, and recommendation, one of the key conversations is on ESG and sustainability, which is the next frontier for businesses. So we come up with policy recommendations, share with government for them to consider, so that it becomes part of the conversation on how do we improve this economy. You know, we are all stakeholders in the context of the Nigerian project, and we will not shy away from sharing genuine concerns and also share workable policy recommendations for government to consider. That we'll continue to do.
Beautiful stuff. Now, before I let you go, are you also sharing in that sentiment that the economy seems to be picking up back, looking at the fundamentals and the figures that we are seeing in recent times? If you align with that thought, what more do you think needs to be done as we wrap this segment of the show up?
Yes, we want to align with that the fundamentals of the economy seems to be adding up. At the macro level, things seems to be stabilizing. The value of the naira, inflation is also taking a dip. Things are stabilizing at the macro level. You know, we can't deny that. But at the micro level, there is still a lot that needs to be done. Ordinarily, the micro should influence what is happening at the macro. But currently, the macro seems to be stabilizing them very well. Kudos to those that are operating the economy. But at the micro level, quite a bit still needs to be done. You know, a lot of oxygen still needs to be pumped at the micro level to get the micro to play its real role of propelling this economy. You know, the aggregate of the micro should actually influence what happens at the micro. So those are the areas that government we need to look at and provide those succor to the macro level, so that things can pick up quite quickly. But as are things improving gradually, we think they are.
Director General of the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, Mr. Dewale Smart Oyeride, also a member of the he's just been elected as the Executive Council member of the Business Africa. That was earlier this month at the ILO conference. Again, let me congratulate you and thank you so very much for being on Business Nigeria this afternoon. I wish you a successful conference.
Thank you very much, and hope we'll see you there.
All right, hopefully I should be there. All right, then, still to come on the show, Israel-Iran's war, crude oil prices, stock markets likely to be key factors this week. You would agree with me that there's already a flip-flop in the entire market. So let's see what this is